subject is warning about electricity. Now, I want you to bear with me for the next few moments, and also let me share with you two stories. One I have told recently, and this one is brand new out of Houston, Texas. And of course, when I say brand new, it's brand new at the time that we're taping it. I have a friend of mine whose name is Bobby, and he lives in Birmingham, Alabama. We often go to Alabama football games with him and his family. Pam and I do. And we were together recently at a game, and afterwards he was telling me a story about his neighborhood there in Birmingham, Alabama, and about the electricity in that area. And he was talking to a friend of his that helps run one of the power and energy plants there in the Birmingham area. And what Bobby told me that day was very intriguing, because I'm not a specialist in these areas, but I do like to keep up with it. And it had to do with the electrical grid. And so as they began to talk about how that in the summer, when the heat is high and people have their air conditioners on, how sometimes, especially on the West Coast, you'll have power outages, and the power will go out for several hours because there's not enough power plants and transformers to run the amount of electricity that is being used. And they call that peak hours, that there are peak hours when the electricity is used, especially during summer seasons in the West Coast, Midwest, and especially in the South and Southeast. Now, the gentleman in Birmingham said to him, he said, "Now, Bobby, you have about 700 homes in your subdivision, correct?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Let's talk for a moment about charging an electrical vehicle, what that would entail." He said, "Now, with 700 vehicles," no, he said it this way, he said, "In your neighborhood of 700 houses, if one of 4 of those homes had an electrical vehicle, the power plant that I run would be able to handle the power." He said, "But Bobby, let's say that every person in your neighborhood of 700 bought an electrical vehicle. If they were charging it at night, just your neighborhood, not the city, 700 homes, we've calculated that we would not have the power, and it would knock the power off." And so I thought, wow, just 700. And these are not people that are for or against a different system. It has nothing to do with that. These are not people that are politically motivated. And sometimes when you begin to expose this, people play it into politics. This is nothing about politics. It's actually about people's lives and about how they're going to live. So I was in Houston, Texas recently at a great church, and I met a gentleman, and his name is Scott, and he began to tell a story. And I have power lines here, and he was there was a group of men that were working on some power lines, and Scott actually had something happen to where he got a hold of a live line. And I asked him, I said, "Now wait a minute, how come you didn't pull your hands off? How comes your hands gripped it?" He said, "Because the electricity causes that to happen." He says, "Your hands just close, and you absolutely cannot yank your hand loose by your own power." And he says it goes from here, and it does this. And I said, "Well, how come it didn't immediately kill you?" And then he explained to me how the electricity works, and the voltage, if it was a higher voltage, it would have killed him instantly, but it was a much lower voltage that he was dealing with. But nonetheless, after it was over with, and he actually held onto that wire for, I think it was 25 seconds, and then they were able to lower that bucket and somehow separate his hands, but he lost both of his hands. And of course, he has the artificial hands that he uses now, that he's able to eat and write and so forth. But he still works at the great power companies there in Houston, and he has a team of hundreds of men. Now he tells me this story that I thought was intriguing. He said, now during the peak season of the heat wave in Texas, in our area, he said so many people, and I don't think you saw this or heard this in the news, so many people had their air conditioners on. He said peak season, and at a certain time, we prepared to run the turbines and more energy during the peak hours, he said, the peak hours of the peak season. He said, but what was happening is when it should be lowering, it wasn't lowering. So people were out working, And then they all come home, bam, all the air conditioners go on. He said, and I said, no, wait a minute, are you telling me this? He said, yes. He said, we were repairing 70 transformers a day in Houston. Now, Houston, if you've ever been there, it takes you an hour to get from one end of the city to the other. There are millions of people that live in that area. So that's, not impossible. But they literally, every day, they were going out and having to replace because it was blowing out the energy. So I asked him, I said, now, everybody is talking about that there will be a law passed to do away with fossil fuels, and that's a whole nother subject, because if you try to do away with petroleum, you do away with plastics, all plastic. Then, ladies, you do away with cosmetics, because petroleum's in cosmetics. That means you're going to have to walk around with no makeup on. I could go on and on and on and tell you that the whole world operates off of petroleum products. And so it just boggles my mind that people have a narrow way of thinking, and they're running in this direction. They're running like a wild horse at the Kentucky Derby, and they're not looking to the left or the right, or looking to say, wait a minute, what kind of disaster are we headed toward, because of we're moving too fast in this. And he said to me, I said, what about electrical vehicles? And he just laughed. And he said, if a law were passed that electrical vehicles were to be used and you had to plug them into your home, he said, number one, we have not built oil refineries in years. So they've not, and he said they've not built them because this has been in the plan for so long to do away with all fossil fuels. He said, but number two, you have problems of millions of people in Houston, running in their cars, stuck in traffic, and they all have to go to substations that don't exist. There's only a handful of these stations that have the electrical plugs, and then you got to sit there for like 30, 40 minutes to get your car charged. In most instances, if it's the electricity's gone in it. Then he said there's the case of all the batteries. If you take a car now and the battery goes out, the replacement's over $20,000. Then he said after 5 years you have to replace all the batteries. So what does that do? And then what do you do with the batteries that are being not used? Then you got all this junk out there, And he wasn't for or against. I want to make this clear. He was just giving me the facts from his perspective as a professional electrician. He said, but here's the big one. He said, let's say that we are in Houston and everybody's running their electricity. Let's say we're able to cover that power, but as nobody's working at the stations but a handful of people, and the power level goes down as people should be sleeping at night. Now 1 million people are charging 1 million vehicles. Guess what? He said you have to choose between electricity for your car or air conditioning in your home in the South. He said there's no other way around it. We have not built enough power plants. And he told me it will take a generation, many years and years. He said, I'm not talking about 5 and 10 years. It will take years to build all the substations and to build the power plants necessary to do just what they're planning right now that they want done by 2020, 2030. And he said, it's impossible. I'm telling you, it's impossible. So what he was warning me about was the danger to the electrical grid. The electrical grid in the United States, I don't know if you know this or not, has not really been updated either. We do have nuclear power plants, but we're not really building more of those because of the environmental issues involved with that, with radiation. Although there are many of them around, we live between one up here in Wattsmar, one in Chattanooga, nuclear power plants, not electrical, but nuclear power plants. And so we're coming into, and it could be, unless we slow this thing down and begin to build the stations that we need, and we begin to build the power stations, and this is according to him, this professional man, he's a pro, and doing this all his life just about, then there will be serious trouble, and the lights are going to go out in the major cities. And when the lights go out, guess what that does to crime? And so I don't know if there's a solution to this, because it's such a hot button issue right now with certain individuals and certain groups that it's almost like they see the picture of what they want, and they're forcing it to happen, and they're not sitting down with a piece of paper and say, okay, what's the real pros and cons to this? Oh, here's the pro, here's the pro. There's nothing in the danger list. And there are people like Scott and others that we've talked to that say, well, let me tell you what the danger is. If they proceed as fast as they're going, without thinking this through and doing what they do, and there is a danger list. So I don't have a dog in this hunt, as the old expression says. I'm just the reporter. I'm just the journalist. I'm just the source that brings you the information from other sources. But I do think it's something that we need to consider, and we need to really look into the possible repercussions of this, in not just trying to force everything to happen and pass quick laws because we're trying to save some animal, save the planet. The tribulation's coming. I don't know what these people are going to do when the judgment of the tribulation comes, because that's coming from God. You can't vote him in, vote him out. He's going to do what he wants to do. But I wanted to share that with you. And let me ask you something. We've turned our comments off on YouTube, and a lot of you don't like that, but we did that because we can't keep up with the good people that we love to hear from and the crazy people that we don't want to hear from. So it was too much for us. We've cut the comments off. But if you watch this and you on our social media, and you have a story that's an accurate story about this particular thing, or if you want to send me a story that perhaps is someone you work with, or maybe your husband or your son works at a place, and this is what they're actually saying, we'd be glad to receive that and look over that. And we appreciate those of you who do stay in contact with the ministry over the years, and also the prayers and support that we get. Now, speaking of that, stay tuned for the next few moments for something special I'm going to share with you. So watch the video to the entire end, subscribe to the channel, and if you learn things that you enjoy learning, give us a thumbs up. God bless you. I heard this many times on Saturday afternoon. I have never missed a main event in many years, and this week's services were the greatest revelation of God's Word yet. Personally, the morning services released the most profound, right now, practical series of revelations that I've actually ever heard in my 46 years of ministry. The 5 messages that I preached were all new insights, some I had never seen until recently, that were birthed in the secret place of prayer. I felt impressed to emphasize lessons on defeating the strange attacks of the enemy, and I included a significant prophetic update, also teaching on the meaning of the year 5783 and teaching the authority of the Holy Spirit in a believer's life. Here's the title of my 5 messages: The 5 Prophetic Omens Coming in 2023, The Prophetic Decree of the Watchers, The Satanic Ambush in the Spirit-Filled Age, Recovering when Satan Chastises Your Peace, How to Issue a Restraining Order on the Enemy. Tony Scott taught a word that opened up a new spiritual level, and the title of the message. 2, you have problems of millions of people in Houston, running in their cars, stuck in traffic, and they all have to go to substations that don't exist. There's only a handful of these stations that have the electrical plugs, and then you got to sit there for like 30, 40 minutes to get your car charged.
Capture. I've been trying so hard these days to not get emotional about politics, because it's my belief that most of our politicians in South Africa are probably corrupt. Some of them are incompetent, underqualified. They don't really focus on their work and deliver services that we need. And when we speak about capture, almost all of them are captured by the various people that fund their political organizations. Never mind the brown envelopes that they get, for the tenders that they dish and other red tape that they make disappear for people they are connected to. But every now and then I get triggered, and of course I keep trying to control my emotions. On Sunday, the President of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, decided to address South Africans regarding the Commission on State Capture, the Zondo Commission, that was run by the now Chief Justice, Raymond Zondo. I've stopped listening to Cyril. I get angry when he addresses the country. The last few times when he was addressing South Africans regarding the hard lockdown, I refused to listen to him because I believe himself, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, our entire government, not entire government, but our cabinet ministers, the healthcare minister at the time was William Kize and Lucho Pasha after him, and all the way up to the World Health Organization and the people that run the world, took the whole world for a fucking goose. And many human rights were violated in the scam that became what we know now as the pandemic. Many people lost their lives because they couldn't get into hospital, because they couldn't get treatment, because the focus was on this deadly virus that was never proven to be deadly by all scientific research and data from the beginning in Wuhan. Certain countries became insanely rich selling masks, sanitizers. Other countries became insanely rich jabbing people with vaccines that are not needed for something that is like just a stronger flu, if even. Anyways, deviating. So I went and I don't want to watch his address, but I went and I read his speech, speaking about how the commission found that there was state capture, which is actually bullshit. It's fucking bullshit and it's fine. Went on to say that they've managed to recover over 8 billion rand, how they've managed to get new leadership at SARS, which was apparently captured, other agencies which apparently had been captured, and how there were private individuals and companies that had infiltrated government in various ways. Spoke about how he sent the reports to so many different stakeholders, how there were currently over 200 investigations, criminal investigations, assets had been frozen in certain places, etc., etc. We obviously know Brian Molefe has been arrested with other people that were at, I think it may have been Transnet, I don't know if it was ESCOM, for state capture and the like. President Jacob Zuma could have been preempting, which is why he did a press conference before this, throwing shots and jabs at Cyril. He may have had it on good authority because there are no secrets in our government and in our politicians. Julius Malima's got files on so many people. He drops them every now and then. So there's a chance that Zuma got a hold of Cyril Ramaphosa's speech before he went to speak. That's just kind of how it works. And he decided to attack first. Thabo Mbeki, similar, These are people that still earn a presidential salary. I think the presidential salary is now at 3 million rand a year, including other perks. Cyril gets it, Jacob Zuma gets it, Thabo Mbeki gets it, Kgalema Motlanthe, even though he was a caretaker president, goes down in the history books as one of the ex-presidents of South Africa. He earns that 3 million rand plus the perks. I'm not here to defend Jacob Zuma and his administration. There was probably capture. What is capture? I think so many people still can't explain it to this day. It means there are certain non-governmental people and organizations, we'll call them business people, who have the influence, who can influence the president, influence cabinet ministers, influence CEOs and chairpersons of state-owned enterprises, and who affect policy in various ways. These people end up getting tenders, not just government tenders, but also tenders from state-owned enterprises, and they have red tape that is removed or that is numbed for their business interests. It's probably a lot of that happened under the Zuma administration. Probably a lot of that happened under the Thabo Mbeki administration. There's probably a lot of that happened under the President Nelson Mandela administration, and there's probably a lot of that still happening now under the Cyril Ramaphosa administration. There are and there have been business people, local and international, that have gotten big tenders from government, that have gotten big tenders from state-owned enterprises, including Transnet, ESCOM. There were many people that made money from the arms deal. And there are people that fund politicians and presidents in particular. What upsets me, of course, is the hypocrisy, which I know it exists and it won't stop, but it's just, this stuff is being said by Cyril. Cyril, who was the deputy president under Jacob Zuma. Cyril, speaking about state capture and how they are making sure they are removing these elements, these criminal elements from government. Cyril was part of London Mining, Lonmin, when state resources were sent there with protests and miners were gunned down. Yes, there's a story there. Yes, the miners were carrying weapons. Yes, the police could say it was self-defense. No one was arrested there. No, Dalipov and them were there, but the widows of these people that were killed have never really gotten true justice. I don't even know if Cyril has actually gone on to say he's sorry, and if he has, who cares, all right? As long as the shareholders are happy, as long as the mine is still making money. That's Cyril. Same Cyril now that's speaking about that. Cyril, who under the Jacob Zuma administration was part of the war room at ESCOM, trying to fix load shedding and those things. But at the same time, his company Shanduga was working in collaboration with Glencore, supplying coal to ESCOM at inflated prices. That's Cyril. The same Cyril who's come out had millions of dollars, allegedly, of foreign currency, which is illegal according to our laws in this country, at his Pala Pala farm. He can now speak and address the nation, but he can't address the nation on what was that currency doing there. We can't hear about the South African Reserve Bank and what are their laws and has he violated them. We're not hearing from the same SARS whose leadership he's appointed on whether tax was paid for that money. Why was he holding cash? Why was the money not EFT'd? Who are the people that paid for that? That's Cyril. The same Cyril who claimed he didn't know about Bosasa giving his son Andile Ramaphosa money when Angelo Agrizzi spoke about it. That's Cyril who then later on was like, oh no, there was actually a donation. That's the Cyril that we have now. It's upsetting for me, man. Cyril that rewarded the current Chief Justice Raymond Zondo with his Chief Justiceship. That's Cyril. Businessman, runs a business on the side, but Parliament was not aware he's violating his requirements as a president. There was another thing I wanted to say. The same Cyril whose bank statements we're not allowed to see, that have been locked. We can't see who funded him for CR17. We speak about state capture, but we can't see who has given him money for his political campaign. We're not allowed by the same courts. Something wrong. This is my theory, because I understand that this country is run by different gangs. I understand that the world is run by different gangs. I believe that the people that were running the apartheid administration, or funding it at least, were the same people that decided to fund Nelson Mandela and the ANC and the government of the time. Same people were handed over to Thabo Mbeki, and he became this economic darling of a president, loved by the Johan Ruperts of this world, Stellenbosch mafia, so to speak, and other people that run business in this country. Jacob Zuma comes in, and he comes in with a new band, new gang. This gang is not different from the old gang. They just happen to not necessarily be fully white and not fully local. And they're coming to dismantle. And the only way for them to come and take the economy away from the incumbents, from the Oppenheimers and the Ruperts and whoever else is running the economy, is for them to break laws. Because that's how it works, right? If people have supposedly stolen your land and stolen your economy and exploited your labor, and you'd like to get it back, the best way to get it back is to take them to a court, international criminal court, and get justice, which has never happened in this country. Instead of us acknowledging apartheid as a human rights violation, and instead of us bringing the United Nations here and getting them to ensure that land is given back and the economy is shared, Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela and FW de Klerk decided to set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And with that, they forgave people. And they came up with BEE, and they came up with this, we'll do land redistribution and land restitution. Not much has changed. And BEE ended up funding a lot of your rich black elites today, the Cyril Ramaphosas of this world. So if you're not getting justice in that way, if someone steals your stuff and you're not getting justice, your next best deal is to steal that stuff back. And by no means am I saying Jacob Zuma and his band of merry men were going to steal the economy and steal government and steal SOEs on behalf of South Africans. No, no, no! They were going to steal it for themselves. But the hope was that it was going to trickle down to more black people than had happened before. And the incumbents got angry. We've been funding the ANC since before apartheid ended. We funded Nelson Mandela, we funded Thabo Mbeki, we funded Kgalema Motlanthe. Who now is this upstart, this Zulu man with a butternut-shaped head? that speaks Zulu and likes dancing to Maskandi and is a polygamist. Who is he? And why is he bringing new people we don't know? Guptas, who are those people? Who are these Indian people? Who are these black guys coming to get tenders? All of a sudden, there's different things happening at the public protector. All of a sudden, they want to change what's happening at the SAPC. All of a sudden, they want to investigate what's happening at SAA and why there's only 3% black suppliers. They want to see the suppliers at ESCOM. Now we're hearing about things like evergreen contracts. We've never heard of that before. Who are these people that have been supplying coal since during apartheid and will forever supply coal? Who is Glencore? Hey, well, why is Glencore working with Shanduga owned by Cyril Ramaphosa? Things we didn't know, that we got to know, because different gangs were fighting, and when gangs are fighting, some of us get to learn certain things that we wouldn't have known otherwise. That's what Jacob Zuma and his band of merry men were trying to do. Again, this is my theory. Not that Jacob Zuma was trying to uplift and save black people as black people would like to believe. It was different gangs. Because Zuma, Ace Makashule, Diti Mabuza, Supra Momapilo, and other people. Gayton McKenzie was a Jacob Zuma, supporter. Zwanele Manyi was and still is a Jacob Zuma supporter, and many other people, Shaudi Mutswaneng, Dudumieni, of course, Brian Mulife, Matsila Koko. Many people are like, look, if this new gang comes into power, we're going to see new black billionaires. It won't be the old white people that are billionaires, and they're chosen black billionaires. Cyril, Patrice, Saki, Z, Lazarus, Daphne, Dr. Anna. There's going to be new kids on the block. Same thing happened when Vladimir Putin came into China. He was taking over, I think, it may have been from Boris Yeltsin. I stand to be corrected. Boris Yeltsin had his own oligarchs, they were billionaires. And when Vladimir came in, he came in with his own boys. And they took over. If Trump is running the administration in America, you best believe his kids are going to eat and his friends are going to eat. Joe Biden comes in, you best believe his boy Hunter's going to eat. And some of his friends and associates. It's just how the world works. So these new black billionaires wanted to come in. They were hungry. They knew there were SOEs up for grabs. They knew there was government up for grabs. And my theory, I stand to be corrected again, is that the Guptas were meant to be these puppeteers who were going to get the lion's share of all these things and then begin dispensing them to certain people. They set up ANN7, they set up the new age, and then through vendor financing, which is like, let's give you the company and then you can pay us later. They gave that to Mzwanele Mine. They may have gotten tenders at SAA, and then next thing maybe they would have passed that on to Tumien. They may have gotten tenders at the SAPC, and then they passed that on maybe to Jacob Zuma's daughter, Ukuku Zuma, who does productions now for TV. We don't know if Ututuzane was going to come in and maybe benefit and become a billionaire as well. And this is not to say that these people are not good at business. It's not to say they're not competent. It's not to say they suck and it's corruption. It's to explain that the billionaires that were built by the British colonialists, the billionaires that were built by the apartheid system, they were built in the exact same way. And these black people that were going to come in, were going to come in the exact same way. Why do you guys believe that Patrice Motsepe deserves to be a billionaire? It's Saki Matoso and Tokyo Sefan.
Hey Marumo!
Why do you think he deserves
How are you?
because wealthy white people said so?